And now it's time for our guest speaker. And our speaker has served on our leadership council previously, and she is a returning member of our council as of this January, which I'm delighted about. She's been a member of our community since moving here from Seattle in 2008. She's been an ordained metaphysical and spiritualist minister since 1982, and she's also a member of the pagan clergy in the Sylvan tradition since 2008. She is the author of the book Essential Mysteries, a user's guide for the 21st century mystic, and has a private practice through which she provides spiritual counseling, healing, and meditation instruction. I know you are welcoming her from home, Erika Ginnis.
Thank you. Aloha. I want to hug you all, so just figure I'm hugging you wherever you are, and in a gentle and virtual way, of course. So let me get my stuff together here. This is all so cool and so new, and I am pleased, and I will do my best to look at you all in the camera. So, and thank you, Kathy. Thank you. So this is the most people I've seen in a really long time. It's very cool, even though it's under 10, but still a lot. Anyway, so this talk has been writing itself in my head for a couple of weeks. That's what happens when I do talks. And I thought I could get away with starting it later in the week, but I could hear it beginning in my head, which is how things occur to me when I'm writing. They just sort of start, and I have to then sit down and start writing them. So I jotted some things down, and I got the beginning and kind of the end done, but I was planning on leaving the middle to sort of sort itself out later, kind of unfold and show me what it wanted to be and how I wanted to approach it all. So last Tuesday, it's a few days ago, after telling someone that I'm definitely not going to work on this, I sat down to meditate. Again, it's one of my favorite things to do, and if you know me, you already know that. Since I was absolutely not going to work on it, it was only Tuesday. So I sat down, and everything has been moving so fast. There's so many things happening, and I wanted to stay current. Everything's been so emotional these days. There's so much happening. So I'm getting ahead of myself. But so there I was sitting, closing my eyes and settling in what I wanted to do and experience. And yes, you've already guessed this, I'm sure. It started in my head again. And I sat there and I started thinking about things I would put in there and what I would say. And I thought, well, I could just sit here and fight this, or I could just go to my computer and start writing. So I did. So that's what I did. I got out of my darn chair, went into the other room, which is the smallest room in my house, but it's where my computer is, and I started to put this all together. Now, the idea of having a beginning and end to my talk and wanting to let the end or the middle sort of sort itself out put a smile on my face, because the topic for this week is actually the path made clear. And it occurred to me that along with all the other analogies that were totally in my head, flowing back and forth, that the path in this lifetime is kind of like that in a way, because you know the beginning, right? That's the being born part, coming into this physical reality in all its glory, and the ending, right? Being, of course, when we leave this physical reality, when we die, or transition, as many of my friends say, or change addresses, as many of my friends say here in Hawaii, and move on to the next spiritual experience or evolution of ourselves as spirit. It's that whole middle thing, though, the life part of it, that can get a little interesting and sometimes hard to follow. It's kind of like an art film with a really good plot, but kind of abstract. And somehow I may have dozed off just for a moment, and I'm trying to get back up to speed with what the heck is happening. Why are we now all in black and white? Why is there a hedgehog in the corner? Is that significant somehow? I love hedgehogs. I had to put that in. Anyway, so navigating the middle part, and by that I mean the life part of this equation, is why we have topics like this, the path made clear. If it was always really, really clear, with no exceptions, there would be no need for a talk about it, yeah? That, however, is not always the case, as you may have noticed, or it might just be me, which is also totally fine. So here's a case in point. When Kathy first asked me at the beginning of March, remember March? It seems so long ago. She asked me if I wanted to speak near the end of May It was what feels like about 100 years ago. I was at a desk in an office at a day job in Hilo that I've since let go of. I was imagining what it would be like near the end of May on Memorial Day weekend. And since I live here in Hawaii, that was a really nice thing to ponder. And if you know anything at all about me, you know I like to talk. So of course I said yes. Now in my mind's eye, I saw the Sunday service, and all the smiling faces of our congregation, because CSL East Hawaii is one of the best groups of people to speak to or play music to ever, in my opinion. It's what they call a good room, yeah? So I imagine my friends here, and even a very special sweetie friend who would have already made the journey from England and would have been here still to see my talk, and I imagine some sort of a get-together since it was a holiday. Well, I don't have to tell you that things have unfolded slightly differently than I had planned. And this can be especially unsettling to someone like me who is used to having a relatively good idea of how things are going to go. Like, not 100%, of course, but I usually have some prior indications of general direction. I'm also relatively consistent in doing spiritual mind treatment, meditation, prayer, and things normally seem kind of plannable. Life is good and very good. We have choices. So maybe you can relate to that, being unsettled a little or a lot. Or maybe you're actually someone who is already really good at surfing the energy and direction without having to know where it's headed. I guess I have some of both. Yet this whole time we are living in has required of me a level of trust and faith that is totally independent of knowing a specific outcome. Now, some may argue that is actually part of the definition of trust and faith. Yeah, so it's not a bad time for me to think about my path, or our path, or the path ahead. So what the heck is our path anyway? What does that mean to you? Is it set? Is it static? Is it changeable? Is it fluid? Here are some things that I've been pondering. Through a conversation with someone who is still, by the way, in England, since the travel ban occurred the very day he was online preparing to buy his ticket. And so rather than being here, he will see my talk on YouTube with the rest of my loved ones and friends. I thought about what is random chance and what's not. Is there anything that's really random? If we are all truly one mind, capital M, as is taught in this teaching, then isn't the universe or divine mind still in there somewhere? So might not the apparent randomness be how it shows us its face and blesses us, even if we don't know how until later, maybe in hindsight? Is my path set? To what degree? Did I set it before I came into this body? Is it all fated now and I am here or not? And if not, if it's not fated, then what, if anything, is a potential fixed point in time? Okay, yes, I was just quoting from Doctor Who there. What's malleable? What's flexible? And using the writing analogy, are we talking sonnet, where there's a strict structure, but I'm free to write anything I want as long as I'm within that structure? Or are we talking free verse, where I can pretty much write anything I want? Did I get to set this all up before I got here? And what was that fine print at the bottom of the brochure? Anyway, so to quote the Indigo Girls, there is more than one answer to these questions, pointing me in a crooked line. And the less I seek my source for some definitive, the closer I am to find. Now, I don't have all the answers at my fingertips, although I do believe that within each of us, there is that which knows what to do and how to do it. And here's another quote from one of my favorite books. The world is your exercise book, the pages on which you do your sums. It is not reality, but though you may express reality there if you wish, you are also free to write lies or nonsense or tear the pages. And that's from Richard Bach, Illusions. I think that an aspect of our path is that which we see when we look behind us, where we have been as we've been following our bliss. However, I think it's also what we see when we look behind us, even we feel like we haven't been following our bliss, which is to say, it is the journey that we take in this lifetime. In that way, we can say we are always on our path, no matter what is going on. It may not be exactly where we want to be, but it is where we are. So as such, underneath our feet is the path we are standing on, and it unfolds as we go. In the same way that there are many ways to travel from Pahoa, which is where I live, to Hilo, where I used to work, some quicker than others, some, at least conceptually, starting out in going the exact opposite direction, going all the way around the world, and then ending up in Hilo. That's also a path. So perhaps it's not just the path, it's how we feel while we're on it. How close to our inner guidance we are, which shows a way that is more fun and rewarding than some other potential ways to go. And from the same Richard Bach book, in the path of our happiness shall we find the learning for which we have chosen this lifetime. I have always really loved that idea. And a quote from my book, Essential Mysteries, A User's Guide for the 21st Century Mystic, which I'll be reading from a little later. I say, and I believe, we each have a unique purpose in this lifetime, something that we as a spiritual being came here to do. We each have a calling, something we are drawn to, a way in which we seek to learn and explore our creative potential. Each being's call is individual and may express itself in a variety of ways. We are each a slightly different vibration of the all that is, a different expression of deity. And as such, there is no one else anywhere who can bring our vibration into the world. So regardless of how external circumstances go, there is that inner landscape that I can really connect to, and it influences my feelings and experiences. And I personally do believe, as Ernest Holmes said, there is a power for good, and we can use it. So that would seem to say that we have choice in all this. So while that is awesome, I think it can also be really daunting sometimes. It's easy to process choice, at least for me, on our paths when things are going really well and all is right in the world. But what about when things are kind of off kilter? When there are so many options and so much information and you have to make choices? It's really easy to get caught up in worrying about doing it right. Choice, especially has been hard lately with all the sort of sci-fi feeling stuff happening around the world. I read somewhere, it was from a trauma doctor, that it's really a normal aspect of dealing with times as intense as these to have a hard time making decisions. So be nice to yourself. I was so relieved when I read that because the week before I had spent, and I'm not kidding, I exaggerate, but this is not a place where I'm exaggerating, more than 24 hours for me trying to decide between two pretty simple aspects of a gaming character I was creating. I could not do it, I kid you not. I had to eventually talk to my sweetie on the phone, and I'm calling England to talk about this, right? Who I'd wanted to save from this conversation, said he doesn't game. But I talked it through with him. It really helped so much, just have another human to talk to. I was reminded, you can just pick one and go with it. So everything seems to be a meta version of everything else these days. So here I was creating a gaming character, which would have a backstory. I'd also have to choose characteristics and abilities. And it occurred to me as I was writing this talk that this was probably exactly the kind of thing I was doing before I got this body. I shudder to think, okay, loves science and science fiction. Cool, yeah, that's good, okay. And a writer, okay, yeah, that can work. Oh wait, well, how about musician? Yeah, that's a good idea, has to be in there too, cool. All right, oh wait, no, there also needs to be something about meditation and about being some kind of minister, and needs to be a Pisces. I can so imagine my soon-to-be guardian angels rolling their eyes and saying, just roll the flippin' dice and take an action. So I have to laugh at myself, and I have to do it often because I'm funny to myself. So one of the things I'm reminded of, or sometimes I even remember on my own regarding choice is this: trust yourself. Trust your inner guidance. If you have a decision and it's clear which one feels like it's best to your inner self, to your heart, then go with it. And if you don't have the clarity, give yourself permission to wait. Here's a really nice quote from Ernest Holmes, There is within ourselves the answer to every question and the solution of every problem. That spirit makes the demand and will answer that demand from within. When we allow ourselves to wait for the mental storm to die down, be still and know, is the secret guidance, as it is of every problem of life. A perturbed mind can never get the correct answer. A stilled mind always can, because the answer comes from the God within. This is so helpful to me. Now, what about choices that seem mostly equal? Ask yourself, do you really need to make the decision at this moment? And if not, let it be. Wait for an answer to reveal itself. The other option, and this is equally as valid, especially if both sides feel equal, you can just pick one and go with it, like my gaming character. This is such a freeing statement because sometimes I have to say to myself, all the answers are right. All the answers are right. Every answer is the right answer. And then I just pick one. Once I take all the pressure off, it changes everything. And as Abraham Hicks says, make a decision and line up with it. There is a stillness that comes into my mind when I let go of the struggle. In this current time, it feels like we are on individual paths and also a collective path. All the changes in this terrain can be really unsettling, even if you have a strong spiritual practice. I've been reminded that in my own practice, I teach clients about something called a growth period, which, simply put, is a name for the time it takes our bodies and our psyches to process spiritual change. I usually relate it to being on a new spiritual journey and how it can feel. However, it also feels relevant with current events, at least it does for me. It isn't a new analogy, but it's pretty applicable and has to do with our path. So I'm going to read from my book again, Essential Mysteries, a User's Guide for the 21st Century Mystic. And this is under the chapter on dealing with growth periods. You may have heard the term dark night of the soul. Well, that can mean many things to many people. It is certainly an apt phrase for some kinds of growth periods. Sometimes when you are in the middle of a growth period, light seems like a distant memory. I want to share with you an analogy that has been very helpful to me. If you are walking through a dark tunnel, analogous to your spiritual journey, or even one portion of that journey, at first, you are surrounded by light. You are at the beginning. You can see where you are going. You know that you are entering a tunnel on purpose, and it will have an end. Sometime later, read as you're going into your growth period, you notice it's getting darker, but you feel okay. You feel okay about that since you can still the light that's coming from behind you. You can still see a little bit. It's coming from where you started. At some time in your journey, you are going to be at midpoint. At that midpoint, it's going to be, if it's a large enough tunnel, you are going to be in pitch black. You won't be able to see the light from where you came from, and the light that you're going toward won't be visible yet. Know that it isn't gone. It just isn't visible in the moment. Now, I've actually tested this out in a real tunnel. Now, this was before cell phones. It was in Leavenworth in Washington, and it was with some other people. I don't know why we did it, but we did it. And sure enough, it got really, really dark. I couldn't see anything. All I could hear was the dripping of water from the ceiling and my own footsteps. And I got very uncomfortable. One might even say scared. The trick, whether you are in a tunnel or in a huge growth period, is to remember to keep moving. If you have the desire to turn around and run back, which you are always free to do, remember, you will still have exactly the same amount of distance to travel, but you'll arrive back where you started. If, however, you keep moving, and a former teacher of mine would say, crawl, drag yourself along, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, just don't stop in the direction that you're headed out, then eventually you will see a teeny tiny point of light. And if you keep going, that light will grow larger. Eventually, you will be able to see all around you, and you will arrive at your intended destination. So why this talk about tunnels, you ask? Simple. It is because we do this all the time, and especially when we are starting something new. We begin, we hit a growth period, and then we want to quit because we get scared. We ask for change, and then when we get it, we're unhappy because things are different. What is important, especially when the process feels challenging, is to remember this is a normal, natural, and necessary part of learning and growing. Many of us like to try to skip this part or try to ignore it. I'm talking about other people, of course, never myself. We may feel more fragile at this time and want to protect ourselves by denying our changes. So unfortunately, one of the things that denial can do is prolong the process. If you acknowledge your growth period, you can then begin to communicate with your body about what's happening and what your body needs. Communication will make it go so much more smoothly. Sometimes all it takes is that conscious recognition that you are indeed in a growth period. It can make it all make sense. And another thing to remember is that growth periods are cyclic. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They don't go on forever, and you will adjust to the changes, and you will have grown. Remember the old adage, this too shall pass. So trust yourself, trust the process, trust the spirit of the universe, trust love. Let it clear your way. Trust that there is that within you that knows what to do and how to do it. And also be really kind to yourself in the process. The one thing we do know is that change is constant. So as I mentioned earlier, on our path this lifetime, we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And since this is actually Memorial Day weekend, I wanted to at least spend a moment to connect with all that has gone before. I'm going to approach it a little differently, though, and it is inspired by a personal experience I had during our Samhain ritual back 1,000,000 years ago in October. So just take a moment. It's just a quick little meditation. And you can close your eyes or not. I won't know. But I find it useful. And connect to the earth. Let yourself ground however you do that. Release any chaos and weirdness down your grounding. Draw the energy of this incredible planet into your body. And spend time letting the energy of the planet remind you of life. Let go of all the voices and static for a few minutes. Listen to the air and the frogs and the birds. Let it remind you of your connection to this amazing place you have come to be in this physical body. And remember that no matter what, you are an eternal spiritual being. You are never ending, ever expanding. You are made from good. This is true right here and right now. Drink that in. Take a moment and just say thank you internally to all that have gone before, those that have passed to the other side of the veil. Next, I invite you to simply breathe. Let the breath breathe you. And imagine how it would feel to have all of the best, highest versions of all our ancestors crowding around both sides of us right now. Our friends and family. What if they were telling you right now how much they adore you just for being? How you are the furthest extension of them, and how they are cheering you on. Let yourself have the incredible sense of how much they all love you. You are the point all has come to. You are so loved. Imagine them thrilled with you, all your ancestors. You don't have to do or be anything other than existing in this moment. You are the furthest most point of expansion of all of them and of you in this moment. Let that love in. You are never alone. You don't have to do anything alone. There is this entire line of people going back and back and back, and they all love you. No matter who they were or what they were like when they were in the body, now they are their highest versions of themselves, and they really, truly love you. Breathe. Now feel your heart expand and feel how we are all related, physically and spiritually. We are one planet, one people, one mind, incredibly and beautifully diverse, and yet one. Honor all that have come before and all that are yet to be. Breathe. You can open your eyes whenever you're ready, or if you had your eyes open, you can keep them open. So in ending, I have to imagine you. So I've had to do this, and I'm doing it now. I have to imagine you all out there somewhere, either watching me at home or, I don't know, watch me later after it's been recorded. I have to imagine your smiling faces. I have to imagine my sweet friend somewhere in another country across the pond. And imagine us all together sometime in the same zip code or postal code. And that's okay. I do truly believe, even in the face of so much bizarreness, that the universe and everything in it, regardless of appearances, is at its base love. And I believe the universe is in a conspiracy for my good. And that doesn't just apply to me, but to everybody, to all of us. It's not a requirement that anyone agree with me on that, although I'm sure some of you do because it's part of our philosophy. What's important to me is that I believe it. If I do, then my path, my path is made more clear. I can see what the next indicated thing, what the next indicated action is going to be, even if I can't see the end of the tunnel. And I'll end with one more Richard Bach quote, again from Illusions. Imagine the universe, beautiful and just and perfect. Then be sure of one thing. The is has imagined it quite a bit better than you have. Aloha.